It's a beautiful spring day here in the Ozarks. I'm near Hollister, Missouri, and I'm on the campus of College of the Ozarks. This is Edwards Mill. Hi, I'm Jim Viebrock. I've spent the last 30 years out photographing, documenting, and now videoing old water mills. Let's take a look around this one. Here at Edwards Mill, they have a nice collection of millstones. I always like to stop and take a look at these because they change throughout the years. Now there's various sizes here represented here and various stages of completion as well. As you can see on the mill, these were a modular type, and then they had solid type. They all have some things that are common about them. They all have those grooves cut in them, and those grooves had to be maintained from time to time. They had to be recut as the millstone wore down. Those grooves is what moves the kernels around inside the mill so that they can be ground and pulverized. This is a really nice collection. Let's talk about the beautiful body of water behind me. This is Lake Honor. Lake Honor is one of the centerpieces here on the campus of College of the Ozarks. There are many things to come and see and do while on this campus. In this case, regarding the mill, Lake Honor represents the mill pond. Ordinarily, the mill pond would be created by a mill dam, where you are damming up the river or creek, providing enough reservoir of water to operate the mill in a low water event. In this case, both the discharge pond and Lake Honor are man-made. All of this is recirculated water. The water at the bottom circulated back up to the top, and it goes through this process over and over and over again. In the context of the mill, the next phase from the mill pond to the mill is the thing called a race. Let's go look at it. Okay, this is the race for this mill, and the race is how the water gets to the water wheel. Sometimes this is going to be called a chase, sometimes it's going to be called a sluice, depends on the application that is being used. But in this case, this is really great for demonstration purposes. I've got two gates behind me here. If you open the furthest one, the water goes on down the sluice towards the water wheel. They'll go over top of the water wheel. I'll show you that in a moment. They currently have it open to bypass the wheel, so this would have the mill in the off position. These are really kind of neat. It also, you could open these up in a flood condition to help control some flood waters if need be. But this is where the mill gets its power. In this case, not electricity, but water creates the energy. We'll talk about that next. Let's talk about how the mill is powered for a moment. This beautiful mill has a 12-foot overshot wheel. In my opinion, this is what most mill enthusiasts are wanting to see. They love to see the large overshot wheels. There are other types of ways that the mill is powered. You can have a large wheel like this, but have the water go on the back side of it. That's called a pitchback wheel. Or you can have the water go under the wheel, pushing it in a reverse motion, called an undershot wheel. There's also a large cast iron piece called a turbine that you would find either beside or under the mill. All of these are valid ways of operating the mill. They all provide horsepower for the mill. Some of them work better than others, but topography ultimately may decide what kind of wheel that you have or turbine that you have to operate the mill. They are the lifeblood of the mill. They are the electric motor of the mill, so to speak. They utilize the water that's coming through the race from the mill pond down a chase, such as this one. An overshot wheel is going to have that water discharge out of the chase just past top dead center. The water is then going to get caught in a trough, and the weight of the water is going to use gravity to turn the wheel. Inertia will keep the wheel turning very smoothly and very efficiently. Now, these wheels have to be perfectly balanced, or they'll cause problems inside the mill. If they're out of balance, they will lob as they move forward, meaning they'll spin fast and then they'll spin slow, and they'll spin fast, then they'll spin slow. So it's important that the wheel be perfectly balanced so that the equipment inside can run smoothly. This is a great example of an Overshot wheel, and this display is amazing. What I love about Edwards Mill, even though it's not a historic functioning mill, it's a reproduction, and it was set up totally as a teaching tool here on College of the Ozarks. If you want to know all of the mechanics and all of the aspects of how a mill works, this is a great place to come because it's all set up inside like a museum for you to explore and to understand. The staff here is eager to explain it to you. One of my favorite parts about shooting these videos is being able to hang out in some absolutely beautiful valley locations. Most of these mills are set next to a water source of some kind, like a creek or a river, and they're just absolutely beautiful. This mill, however, everything you see here was created by man. So both the mill pond and the discharge pond were man-made, and they are recirculating. So they're pumping water out of the lower pond up into the upper pond through the fountains to make this mill operational. So it's not exactly authentic, but it's still a really cool place to come look. Now let's talk about why so many mills are not in existence today. Back in the 1800s, mills were everywhere, particularly out in the country where these settings were, these beautiful settings were. The problem they had is the topography where they were at, the actual geographic location where they were at. As you all know, creeks and rivers flood from time to time. So these mills were absolutely plagued with high water events. Now, if it was just simply a high water event, the water gets up in the mill, that can be cleaned up. The product can be thrown away and they can start over again. But when you have a raging river going by, and sometimes they're going to have large trees and things in it and debris in it, you can only imagine a full-size oak tree with a root ball will float even though it weighs 3 or 4 tons. So this becomes a very powerful battering ram that if it would strike the side of a stick-built building like this, it would completely decimate the building, and all of the equipment in it would now be floating downstream. That's one of the ways that these mills were destroyed. If you've watched any of my videos, you know, particularly here in the south part of the United States, you will hear me talk about the Civil War being very damaging to these mills. Where you had these skirmishes between the North and the South fighting over positions, they would actually burn the mill in a retreat type scenario to keep the other side from using it as an asset. Believe it or not, these mills were the economic centers for a lot of these communities. If you have control of the mill, you have control of the food source, and you have control of the economy for which the mill serves. The other way that mills oftentimes burned, because even if in the New England states, when you look at the history of the mill, you'll find out that at some point in time, it burned once or twice. And the question is why? Well, what you may not realize is that corn in particular, in its dry state, is extremely flammable. Modern day pellet stoves, some of them are set up to burn corn kernels. This is amazing. So imagine what's happening in a mill like this, where you've got all this dry corn being stored, and in the parlor where the grinding is taking place, you have highly flammable dust floating around in the air. A lot of these mills had cast iron gears in them. Metal on metal creates a spark. So oftentimes you would have a flash fire in these old mills, and with plenty of dry fuel sitting around, and the fact that the mill's made out of wood and dry wood at that, it was like striking a match. So it's very rare to find a mill that's been intact for 100 years or more that hasn't been plagued either by a water event or by a fire event. I mentioned that everything at Edwards Mill is man-made. The mill pond, the discharge pond, all of it's man-made, and it's all recycled. What I didn't mention is that everything on this campus is being maintained by the students themselves. Some of the construction projects are being done by the students themselves under supervision of qualified contractors. This mill is a reproduction mill. This mill was never in commercial production as far as we think of mills today. This mill was built in 1972. It features a 12-foot Overshot wheel, and it is really cool. So let's take a look inside. Okay, here in the basement of Edwards Mill, they have a really great display on the process of how all of this works. The first step is to get the kernels off of the ear of corn. That's done with a thing called a corn sheller. This is a small hand crank one. Some of the larger mills will have a bigger version of this that runs off the belt pulley. But these are really cool. You can pick these up at farm sales. These are hand cranked. You put the kernel or the cob in here. The kernels fall out the bottom and the cob comes out the end. This is a cool piece. And like I say, they come in lots of different shapes and sizes. Some of them are 2 holes, some of them are 1 hole, some of them are operated by the belt, some of them you hand crank like that. I have about 44 of these in my personal collection, by the way. The next step is to clean the corn up. There's going to be little pieces of debris in there. So you're going to put it in here, and this machine shakes it out, and it'll separate it out into different sizes. There's also a fan on here, blows the chaff out of it so that it's nice and clean when you take it to the grinder. Then there's going to be some kind of a grinder. Now there are multiple types of grinders. This one is a very old vertical stone mill. I have a meadow stone mill similar to the one they have over here. I'll show you in just a minute. The kernels go in the top. They go down through there. The machine shakes as it goes in there. The kernels drop between the 2 stones, and they are pulverized as the stones work against each other. These are also belt driven. And they come in lots of different sizes. This is a very small one. I'm going to show you the big ones that they have on display here as well. But let's go over and look at about their 25-inch Meadows mill over here. Okay, this is a vertical grinding stone. I have one of these in my personal collection. Mine is a Meadows. I'm not sure the brand of this one, but it's very, very similar to this. The pulley is how this is powered. This will have a belt on it going up to the main pulley system into the mill, so this would be operating under water power. You put your cleaned kernels in here. This thing shakes, and as it does, it keeps everything moving. It keeps it going through the different sifter screens that are in here. From here, it drops down into the stones, which are actually in this case here. In this case, they're vertical like this. One of them is stationary, the other one turns against it. And that's going to determine how far apart you have them will determine how coarse your grind is. It all shakes out the front here and goes through another set of screens that will separate it once again according to size. That's really cool. So let's look at one of their horizontal stone mills. This is one of about 5 of the horizontal mills they have on display here in Edwards Mill. They've got this one broke apart, and it's downstairs where I can talk about it with you a little bit. We talked about outside the millstones and how they have these grooves cut in them. From time to time, those have to be recut. So in some of my videos, you'll see the guys using modern tools to recut those. In the old days, they had to do all of this by hand. So they would use a hammer and a little chisel thing similar to this to cut those grooves. Now what happens is the kernel drops in there, and when it's full, it comes in these deeper spaces because it has the room to move around. As it gets pulverized, as it gets ground down, then it will move to the smaller, flatter spot. And how close you have those 2 mills together, those 2 stones together rather, is how coarse or how thin your grind will be. So depending on whether you're doing corn or wheat, will depend on the settings that you have with this. So these are adjustable. And again, from time to time, they had to change these out. They would break or they'd just get worn to the point where they couldn't do it anymore. And it took a special crane to lift them off. So they got holes drilled in the side, and they could lift the stone off if they needed to clean it or if they needed to resurface it or something like that. These stones are very heavy. This one's probably 28 inches, maybe 30 inches, and I'll bet it weighs 800-900 pounds or more. The bigger ones upstairs, I think they got some 48 and 52-inch stones. Those probably weigh way over a ton each half. So they're very heavy and very dangerous to deal with. So they had to have these special cranes to do with this. Now, I'm really happy that these are healed. What I love about this mill is it's a great teaching location where you can stop and explain the entire process without all of the loud noise of the mill operating to work. So this is a really great example of a horizontal mill. The vertical mills work exactly the same. They're just up on their side. Now, if you're wondering how this one is powered, down below is the belt, and it would work hooked to a horizontal belt that was hooked to the main shaft in the mill. So again, this is a great place to come if you want to learn the mechanics of how mills operate. I just want to show you this for a second. They have a small woodworking display here in these mills as well. When we think about these mills, we traditionally will think that they're all about grinding corn and wheat, when in reality they did all kinds of other things. You know, complete woodworking shops were also powered by water. So the mill was a very versatile tool for lots of different things to do. Some of the mills that I've toured actually have a pulley or a slot in the side of the building and a pulley outside that's still powered by the main drive shaft that is for exterior tools, for like a buzz saw or some kind of a wood splitter. There's a place where old mills sit silently in valleys waiting to be rediscovered, and you know where they are. Hi, I'm Jim Viebrock. I'm the host of Millin' Around. I want to know where those mills are, and you can help me by sending an email to the address on your screen that has the mill name, the contact person who either owns or supervises the mill, a couple of photographs that you've taken, and maybe a little history about the mill so that we can be in contact with them about maybe adding them to our collection of mill videos. In the meantime, enjoy the videos that we already have, and let's go find another mill to explore. I hope you've enjoyed our tour of Edwards Mill here on College of the Ozarks. I'm Jim Viebrock. Let's go find another mill to explore.